It's a little different being in front of an audience that hasn't heard part 1 through 15 to start with part 16, because this builds on a lot of what was discussed previously, but I'll make my best effort. Life has more difficult challenges than this one. Personalities from Ramayana, because this is a new audience and this is the final class of the whole session. We've been discussing, well, we'll go further back. The inspiration for this was visits to Ayodhya, Chitrakoot, then Panchavati, or what's the city that's near? Nasik, and then Hampi. So the first 4 khandas of Ramayana, we went to most of those places. And then there was a lot of enthusiasm, more, you know. So it turned into spending time with groups of devotees just discussing personalities, because the sequence of events is the flow of the first 4 khandas, but then following the first 4 khandas, there's personalities. Focusing on personalities makes a lot of sense, and it's a new approach, a different approach to the whole subject matter. So that was what inspired it. It started with the Chinese devotees with no pictures. Just what we did with the Chinese devotees is I asked them, you know, the scholarly devotees amongst them, to pick personalities from China's history that have some of the same characteristics of the personalities within Ramayana. Where that comes from is there's some history of religion in China. And the history of religion in China shows that Buddhism lasted because it accommodated the Chinese characteristics of Chinese history and Chinese culture. Because, as you know, Buddhism doesn't come from China. It came from India. And when Brahmins took their Brahminical teachings to China, it didn't last very long because they weren't flexible. They didn't accommodate Chinese characteristics. And so there's historical record of efforts to bring Hinduism or, you know, the Vedic culture into China as far as practices and teachings and so on, but it didn't have the same support that Buddhism did, because Buddhism included things like worship of ancestors, and there's no such thing in Buddhism, worship of ancestors, but Buddhism adopted it, etc., etc. So there was a strategy to help the people of China understand who is Lord Ram and the personalities in Ramayana, who are personalities like that in Chinese history. So in Chinese, someone narrated for 5-7 minutes, this personality well known, that personality well known, that resembles the personalities in Ramayana, and then I would speak on the personalities of Ramayana. They have an acronym for it. Everything's got to have an acronym these days. KCCC, Krishna Consciousness with Chinese Characteristics. So that's how it started. And some of the devotees said, oh, why don't you do it with pictures, and why don't you do it for us? And so that's what this is. Part 16. Marica. And the image that goes with Marica is this golden deer not just golden, but kind of like rainbow-colored, spectacular deer, a mystical deer. And the history behind Marica, and then his personality, is his grandfather was a Yaksha named Suketu. What's a Yaksha? You ever heard of a Yaksha before? Yes? The Yakshas, a little background on Yakshas, because it has some bearing on Marica. Yakshas are followers of Kuvera. Their residence primarily is in the upper region above Bhumandala, Bhuvarloka, below Swargaloka, but above this earthly realm, Bhuloka. But they also have residences in the earthly realm. They can travel here and there. They're known for being very powerful warriors. They have mystic powers, like what happened with Dhruva. They did mystic powers and it bewildered Dhruva. They showed all kinds of things and threw all kinds of things, and he was bewildered. The Brahmanas advised him, here's what you need to do, and the mystical things disappeared. So they're mystical. And they're kind of on the darker side of the modes of nature. They're powerful, but they're in that kind of dimension. They're not demons, but they're not devas either. So there was a leader amongst the Yakshas whose name was Suketu, who was childless. He wanted a son. He underwent severe austerities for quite some time, and eventually Lord Brahma came. And Lord Brahma came giving him a benediction that he wouldn't receive a son, but he would have a very beautiful daughter endowed with the strength of 1,000 elephants. It's a pretty powerful lady. And when she was born, he named her Tataka. Tataka was Suketu's daughter. And after some time, Tataka married a demon, and the demon's name was Sunda. And Sunda and Tataka had 2 children, and their names were Marica and Sabahu. Marica is being described as a very tall and broad shoulders and very powerful, and Subahu was known to be a very good wrestler. Sons of Sunda and Tataka. Now, there's not a family relation between Marica, although when Ravan was ruling in Lanka, he treated Marica like he's one of the family, but he wasn't. He wasn't a family member. In fact, he was elder, like the age of one of his uncles, and therefore by age he looked up to Marica. But, by power, he was in charge. So that's the relation between Marica and Ravana. And Sunda was very puffed up after having this benediction from Brahma and all these austerities. He started going around in the forest and making trouble for rishis in the forest and harassing them and troubling them. And so one day he decided to trouble Agastya. That was a mistake. And Agastya reduced him to ashes just by a mantra, pile of ashes. And when that news got to his wife, Tataka, and to her 2 sons, Marica and Subahu, they made a pledge. They were going to destroy Agastya's hermitage. So they went to destroy his hermitage, and Tataka, being so powerful, she decided she was going to kill Agastya. to take revenge for the death of her husband. And as she was rushing towards Agastya, he cursed her. First, he cursed Marica, that he would become a Rakshasa, and then he cursed her. She would become, her beauty would be gone, she would be grossly distorted, monstrous shape, and also a Rakshasi. So she wasn't very happy with that. And Marica was cursed to become a demon. Now, there's no mention of what happened to Sabahu, but those two are mentioned specifically. Now she's still in this get-back mentality, Tataka. And so Marica, being cursed to be a demon, he found happiness going into the forest, disturbing the sages, attacking them, killing them, and spoiling sacrifices, which was exactly what Vishwamitra had come to Ayodhya to ask for Ram to come and help, to relieve Marica. This is Marica's thing. He wasn't, he wasn't a Rakshasa, but he was a demon. And Tataka was a Rakshasi. So here's when Vishwamitra and Ram and Lakshman came to this forest, it looked really weird. Ram said, "What happened to this place? All the other places you've taken us were very, very celestial-like and very verdant and wonderful and nice birds and all nice things. This is really eerie. It's just the sound of crickets and, bad sounds. And what happened here?" And as Vishwamitra would always do, he'd give the history behind every place when Ram asked. And he said that previously, this is a forest where Tataka resides. Previously, it was blessed by Indra because the forest, now known as these flourishing kingdoms of Malada and Kurusha, after he did long austerities for having killed Vritrasura, there was an abhishek done to cleanse him of the sins. The water from the abhishek came to this forest. The forest accepted his sins. He gave a benediction. It would be a very nice place. And for a long time, it was a very nice place. It was such a nice place that Agastya, for some time, made it one of his places of austerities. But Tataka, knowing that that was one of the places of his austerities, she went there to make it a desolate place. When she went there, everybody left because she was a terrorist, a really bad lady. And that's how it became like it has become. This is the forest of Tataka. And Vishwamitra said, "I brought you here specifically so you can slay Tataka. And I want you to do so now." So Ram obediently twanged his bow. There's something very special about the bow of Ram. Whatever he twanged it made a big sound, apparently. And he woke up Tataka. And when she woke up, she started screaming, "Who's in my forest?" and came rushing to smash and kill and defeat. And there you see Vishwamitra pointing, "Let her have it, don't delay." The first, according to Valmiki Ramayana, the first thing she did was she made a big dust storm. That's what you see in the painting up in the top there. For 1 hour, they couldn't see anything. Terrible, terrible dust storm. And as the dust storm subsided, she then sent a tremendous shower of stones upon the two 12-year-old boys. Now, we've been noting there's a whole series of paintings, but the whole Ramayana painted by somebody that's an Arabic artist because he has his notes in Arabic. I don't read Arabic, but they like Ramayana. Everybody likes Ramayana. And so what did Ram do? He just fired arrows and all those stones just became powder. And then Ram, using his arrows, cut off her arms. And when her arms were severed, she started wailing very loudly. It was a lot of pain. And Lakshman decided to do, where we were commenting, there's something in Valmiki Ramayana about noses and ears. They get cut off. So Lakshman cut off her nose and her ears. I mean, it wasn't just Sherpanaka and her. It was like several persons that happened. And so she made herself invisible. And then assuming different forms and then disappearing in different forms and disappearing. She had magic powers. And she got together another shower of stones. They didn't even know where it was coming from. And Vishwamitra said, it's starting to get dark. Rakshasas become more powerful when it gets dark. Don't delay. And then the whole discussion that we went through before. I know that you're hesitant because according to Vedic culture, a woman is not to be killed, but here's the 16 reasons why she should be killed. And Ram listened to what he said, and his conclusion was, my father said, whatever you say I should do, I'm ready. And so he drew his bow and arrow, and because he was just delaying, he now was no further delay. And he's ready to kill, not just repel and stop her, but to kill her. And so he does. And he shot her in the chest. And there's a lot of paintings of she's losing her life by Ram's arrow. There's a very interesting looking painting. She's picking up trees like it's twigs. And here's a diorama depicting the killing of Tataka. And after Tataka is killed, we know what happened next, right? The demigods said, fantastic. Please give to Ram and Lakshman all celestial weapons, because Ram, will be the instrumental in killing Ravana and the horde of the Rakshasas and so many other demons. So celestial weapons. And they're not yet at the destination. The destination is his ashram. Vishwamitra's ashram is called Siddha ashram. And it's called, he gives the history, it's called Siddha ashram because after Vamanadev subdued Bali Maharaj and restored the kingdom of heaven back to the Devas and took it away from Bali, he came here to this place, therefore it's now called Siddha Ashram. And that's the history of the place. And then he gave him very clear instructions. The demons, Marica and Subahu, they'll come at any time. The yajna takes 7 days. And they could come anytime in the morning, anytime at night. So you're just 12-year-old boys, but you stay awake day and night. Stand guard, while as you see in the painting in the background, the yajna will go on. And they're quite capable of that austerity. They stood guard. And on the 7th evening, when Rakshasas become stronger, there they are, Subahu and Marica. And Ram and Lakshman are ready with their bow and arrows, and they kill Subahu, but Ram doesn't say why, but we can intuitively understand why, because he had another function to play later on. That's why. He didn't kill him, but he hit him with an arrow that sent him 800 miles flying in the air. Now, what's 800 miles? What's the different distance between, let's say, Hartford and New York City? How many miles? 200. What? So between Boston and Washington D.C. Maybe. Anyways, it was a powerful arrow, and he landed in the ocean. Marica. This is another painting showing the battle. One of those paintings. There's two parts in it. There's Vishwamitra doing the yagya. You see the fire in front of his little cottage, and up top is Ram with his arrow firing at Marica, at Subahu and Marica, and there's Lakshmi also firing. And at the very bottom left, they fall to the ground. But Marica didn't fall to the ground; he fell to the ocean. And there's Ram and Lakshman with their bow and arrows. The sages doing their yagya. And Marica was hit in the chest, 800 miles, fell in the ocean. Well, it tells you something, because whereas Ayodhya is not far from Lucknow. And so the distance between Lucknow and the ocean, that's the distance, fell in the ocean. I don't know if that's the distance. In any case, here's another painting where they're firing at Marica and Subahu, are throwing down nasty bones and blood and stool, and desecrate the yagya of the Brahmins. And the Brahmins are disgusted with what's happening. So after we'll hear the detail of Marica, what he says in Valmiki Ramayana. But after he fell in the ocean, what did he do? After he fell in the ocean, he decided to go to Lanka. And he went to Lanka to kind of recuperate from the shock of being hit by an arrow and flying 800 miles in the air, landing in the ocean. And after he was in Lanka for some time, he made some friendship with some other Rakshasas. And they decided they'd have another visit to the mainland. And they all had mystic powers. And so they change themselves into deer and go into the forests where there's sages, and the sages would be unsuspecting because they're just deer. But when their sages were least expecting, they'd attack them and devour them. And that was their fun. And they started to, that's how, by the way, that's how Lakshman guessed, that's not a deer, that's Marica, by name, because he had this reputation. That's what he and his buddies did. So there was a second encounter with two fellow Rakshasas. And when Ram saw them, he challenged them. And they started to come after him, including Marica. Ram fired 3 arrows, and when Marica saw the arrow, he ran the other direction. So the arrow of Ram didn't pierce him, but the other two, they didn't know how powerful was Ram. They died by Ram's arrow. And then he went into seclusion, just practicing asceticism. That horrible Rakshasa became an ascetic, or at least a horrible demon became an ascetic. So we don't hear too much about Marica until we hear about Ravana getting the bright idea that he needed Marica's help to kidnap Sita. And it happens twice. Now, check out the 10-headed, 20-armed Ravana, and then behind him is this carriage drawn by donkeys, not horses. We'll see that nice donkey carriage a little bit later. And the fellow on the left, that's Marica. So twice Ravana approached Marica with the plan that he would have an instrumental role in kidnapping Sita. And we're going to read what Marica said both times. The first time was when Akampana, who was one of the 14,000 soldiers in Afghanistan that were killed by Ram, but somehow he escaped. The somehow he escaped was he ran. And he knew that Ram would not fire from behind when someone is running. So that's how he got free. And he ran and ran and ran and somehow made his way to Lanka. And he is a relative. There's a, with all of what these handouts that we gave to everybody for the seminar, there's a genealogy chart of Ravana from his mother's side and from his father's side. And from his mother's side, Akampana is one of his mother's sister's sons or something like that. But he's afraid. Ravana is wild. And so he approached him to give him a report of the bad news. Not only 14,000 soldiers, but your cousin brothers were killed, Karandushan. Many cases, Karandushan are said to be brothers of Ravan, but more precisely, they're cousin brothers. Let's just, like Prabhupada would many times speak of the hesitation that Arjuna had in fighting in Kurukshetra battle was he didn't want to kill his brothers. They weren't brothers, they were cousins. But in Vedic culture, a cousin is often spoken of as a brother. So Karandushan were like that. They were cousins, or cousin brothers. And he gave the bad news. They've all been defeated. Ravana was furious. And who did this? And he describes the prowess of Ram. And, puffed up Ravana says, well, I'm going to go get him. And Akampana says, that's not a good idea. It's not a good idea because, and he gives, the power of Ram, this and that, and the other thing and the other thing. But I have a suggestion. And the suggestion is, if his determination becomes weakened, then you can get him. And his determination will become weakened if Sita is kidnapped. And he is separated from Sita, he'll lament and he'll become weakened, and then you can get him. So Ravana liked that idea. He liked that idea a lot. And so he went out the back door and he got the donkey chariot carrier. He didn't get Pushpaka Vimana because he wanted to sneak around. No one would know what he was up to. And he went to the place where Marica was. And there in this painting, there's Marica on the right. And he's describing to Ravana what he experienced. And I want to read. So Ravana gives the plan. The plan is, I want you to lure Ram away from Sita so that I can kidnap Sita. And when I kidnap Sita, Ram will become weak, and then it'll be easier to defeat him. That was the plan, and I need your help. Now he wasn't very demanding. He was actually speaking very respectfully, like one would speak to a respectable uncle. He had a capacity to speak nicely when it fit his purposes to do so. Here's Marica's response. With great shock and horror, Marica replied, whoever has given you this idea is actually your worst enemy in the guise of a friend. O Ravana, if you try to carry out this foolish plan, it will only result in your own destruction, for Ram has inconceivable power on the level of Lord Vishnu himself. Lord Ram is like a fathomless ocean, Crocodiles are his bow, and whirlpools are his mighty arms. The releasing of his arrows are like those of a constant flowing ocean waves, spreading from shore to shore across the entire battlefield, wherein his enemies drown. Oh, king of the Rakshasas, it would be far better for you to control your wrath and return to Lanka. Enjoy yourself there with your wives, and let Ram enjoy with his wife in the Dandak forest. Otherwise, you will unnecessarily bring disaster down upon your own head. So you see, Marica is pensive because he respects Marica, and he's had his experience. So he decides to put a pause on that idea. He goes back to Lanka, and after some time, he has a little exchange with his sister, Sherpanaka. And Sherpanaka, I didn't get into it as much as I was thinking to get into it. Sherpanaka, you read that section, and she's very exploitative. She's very manipulative. She knows Ravana's buttons, and she knows which buttons to push to get what she wants. And she says she has his interest. She doesn't have his interest. She has her own interest. And her interest is get back. Friends, enemies. And look at what they do with my nose and my ear and, get back. But she needs him to get back. So she insults him left and right, which says so many things. What kind of leader are you? You don't have any spy network. You have to rely on me, your sister, and what's going on. Here's what's going on. And how smart are you? And you use 14,000 soldiers in Karan Dushan, and what are you going to do about that, Ravan? But when all that happened, my ears and nose, is because I wanted Sita to be your wife. Because she's so beautiful. She knows his buttons. And she should be your wife. But when I tried to bring her here to you to become your wife, look what they did to me. Take revenge. And she gave the same plan that Akampana gave, that Ravana liked. And she said it again. Ram will be weakened if she's kidnapped. You'll have Sita, and Ram will become weakened. You can defeat him. That's the game plan. He liked the game plan. And so as you see in the painting at the bottom, that's going out the back door with his donkeys. He didn't go on Pushpaka Vimana. He went again to visit Marica, because Marica is known to be mystical and very intelligent and very capable. So he went for a second time. And in the second time he went, he also, the starting language was very sweet and very respectful. And it changed pretty quickly. Marica said, "O king, what is the reason for your early return to my residence?" Ravana replied, "After hearing of Ram's slaughtering the Rakshasas at Janastan, I have not found a moment's peace. I have therefore made up my mind to kidnap Sita, and I want you to help me." To this end, and he describes the whole plan. You know how to change shape, become a deer. You become a deer, go in front of Sita, she'll be attracted to the deer, and you just lure Ram into the forest, and I'll take it from there. Now, he doesn't in his plan describe how to take Lakshman away, other than this. He says, if he does kill you, then you just call out in a voice that sounds like Ram's voice, "Lakshman, Sita, help." And then Lakshman will come to help, and then Sita will be alone, and I can take her. And I need your help. That's the kidnap plan. Hearing the name of Ram, Marica became greatly fearful. As he thought about Ravana's plan, his mouth became dry. Staring with unblinking eyes, Marica addressed Ravana with folded hands. O Lord, if you try to carry out this plan, it will surely cause the destruction of all the Rakshasas and your kingdom of Lanka. Because of your lusty nature and ignorance of Ram's prowess, you are foolishly rushing toward your own doom. Please hear from me of Ram's supremacy and potency before you act blindly, thus bringing about your own destruction. Previously, I used to wander about the earth, club in hand, feeling very proud of my superhuman strength. I've subsisted upon the flesh of rishis in the Dandak forest. Out of fear, Vishwamitra approached King Dasrath to solicit Ram's help for protecting his sacrificial performances. Therefore, while Ram guarded Vishwamitra's sacrificial arena, I ignorantly went there with the intention of disrupting the yajna. However, with just one arrow, Ram hurled me 800 miles into the ocean and then killed the other Rakshasas accompanying me. When I regained consciousness, having thus been spared by Ram, I returned to Lanka, but was still not cured of my false pride. Then, with 2 Rakshasa assistants, taking the form of large, carnivorous deer with flaming tongues, I returned to the Dandak forest and roamed about, drinking the blood of the rishis. As it happened, I again came upon Ram, who was wandering in the Dandak forest with Lakshmi and Sita. With the bitter memory of my past defeat in my mind, and considering how Ram had accepted the life of renunciation, I was determined to gain revenge. However, when I rushed at him, Ram released 3 arrows. My 2 companions were killed instantly, and I fled for my life. I think my life was spared only because Ram's arrows do not kill one who flees from the battlefield. Ever since that time, I have been consumed with fear of Ram. As a result, my inclination for violence and fighting has vanished. Having given up all malice towards others, I have taken to an ascetic life of yoga practice. However, I have failed to obtain peace of mind, for whenever I happen to glance upon a tree, I think it's Ram, dressed in tree bark. Thus, the entire forest appears to have become transformed into innumerable Ramas. Because of this, whenever I look anywhere, I become terrified. Sometimes I see Ram in my dreams, and I immediately wake up, my heart thumping in terror. Indeed, I become so afraid of Ram that whenever I hear a word beginning with the letter R, such as Rata or Ratna, my heart trembles with fear. O King, for your own welfare, as well as for mine, I advise you to forget kidnapping Sita. Aside from fearing Ram, why should you perform such a sinful act? There is no offense more punishable than abducting another's wife. Remain satisfied with your thousands of wives and save your dignity, fortune, kingdom, and life itself. Well, Ravan doesn't like the word no. And so his mood changed. And he grabbed his sword and threatened and said, either you help me or you're dead. And here's what Marica says in response. Flatterers are quite easy to come by, my lord. Rare is that person who will speak unpleasant words that are meant for one's benefit. A minister should always give good advice, even if uncalled for, especially when the king is misguided. Unfortunately, however, it is seen that one who is about to die is never willing to take good advice. O king, if we carry out your plan, I am certain that both of us will end up dead. Still, I would rather die at the hands of an exalted enemy on the battlefield rather than be killed by you here. Therefore, let us depart at once. And the rest is history. We all know the history. a nice painting. In the background are three very ugly, who knows what, people, apparently accompanying Ravan. And Marica's ready to go and do the business of assuming the form of a golden deer to carry out Ravana's plan. And it worked. There's a nice description. I'd like to read that nice description of what the deer looked like. If I could find it. No. Oh, here it is. Marica's deer form had numerous jewel-like silver spots, with the tips of its horns appearing like sapphires. Its mouth appeared like a pinkish lotus flower, its tail like a rainbow, and its ears were bright and blue. Indeed, the magical deer appeared to have been constructed from many varieties of valuable jewels. With a dazzling luster, the deer seemed to illuminate the entire area surrounding the cottage. Sometimes it nibbled at the grass, and sometimes it frolicked among the trees. So seeing the deer, Sita was enamored. And this is a major part of the commentary of the Sri Vaishnavas, because I've been explaining this, so it's kind of a rerun for those who have heard it so many times. The Sri Vaishnava commentators value Ramayana like we value Srimad Bhagavatam. It's so important to them. And they say consistently, because there's generations of commentators that speak about this desire of Sita to enjoy the deer has no connection with Ram's enjoyment as the first time she ever had such a desire to enjoy separately from Ram, which is like a conditioned soul wanting to enjoy Prakriti separate from Bhagavan. And from that point, she's acting like, by Yogamaya's influence or the internal potency's influence, she's the internal potency, acting as if she's a soul that's turning away from Krishna and falling into the clutches of Maya. In the clutches of Maya, in this case, is Ravan. I mean, it's not all metaphorical, but it's a point where drastically things change because of that separate from Ram's desire. And then he, of course, the Ramayana lesson is, according to Hanuman, Ram wanted to teach the world, don't become overly attached to your husband or wife, because you'll have to suffer too much. So, without belaboring that point, Lakshman right away doesn't buy it. No. Who's seen a deer like that? There's no such thing as a deer that looks like that. It's not a mystical thing. It's a Rakshasa thing. It's Marica. And so many paintings. There's Lakshman holding his chin, doubting, Ram, don't go. And Ram goes. He said, even if it's some mystical thing, or even it's a Rakshasa, who can harm me? I'll kill it. I mean, one of the things that Sita says is, even if you can't catch the deer, when we go back to Ayodhya, I love the forest, the gardens, more than any other place than the palace is the gardens. And if we have that deer in the gardens, how nice it will be. Oh, Ram, get the deer. And if you can't bring the deer back, then just kill it. And then we can skin the deer, and you and I can sit on the deer skin. That's not Sita. But that's what Valmiki Ramayana says she said. So Ram says, if it's a Rakshasa, I'll know it and I'll deal with it. So please stay and guard Sita, because we've heard throughout, that's one of the services. We heard in the yesterday evening classes, consistently, that's one of the services that Lakshman did, is make sure that Sita is safe. So he stays back to make sure Sita is safe, while Ram goes off chasing after the golden deer. And when he goes chasing after the golden deer, after some time he realizes this isn't a golden deer, this is a Rakshasa. So he fires an arrow and pierces the body of the Rakshasa. And as exactly was the plan, Marica, transforming into the Rakshasa and from the deer, calls out in a loud voice, "O Sita, O Lakshman." And loud enough that they hear. Now here's two questions. Why did he do that? Yeah, but why did, Marica understood Ravan as a bad guy. So why did he do that? Why did he assist Ravana to do bad stuff and call out, "Oh, Sita, oh, Lakshman"? Why did he do that? Commentators say he wanted Ravana to be killed. Now, one way of wanting Ravana to be killed is he be killed by Lord Ramachandra. That would be auspicious. And the other is he wanted to get back because he's a bad guy. And by doing this, he would be able to kidnap Sita, and thus it would ensure that he would be killed by Ram. That's one explanation. I don't know if you've ever wondered why he did that. Besides, that was part of Ravana's plan, but he didn't have to follow Ravana's plan. Here's another question. He knew how powerful was Ram. And he knew that he was supremely powerful above Ravana. So why didn't he, when he got to Panchavati, just go surrender to Ram and say, "Ram, this bad guy, Ravana, you're the one that you appeared in this world to destroy. He wants me to help him kidnap Sita. Give me protection." Ram would have given protection because that's Ram's character. So why didn't he do that? Instead, he went off and did what he did. Why didn't he take shelter of Ram? The nature of a demon. Yeah. But see, even bad people can become good people because he understood he's all powerful. He was afraid of him, but he wasn't, as he became an ascetic instead of a terrible person. Any other suggestions? Yes.
Better I want to kill in the hands of Ravana. I will kill in the hands of Rama.
That was his wish. But he didn't have to be killed by Ravana. He could just surrender to Ram, and he'll be protected from Ravana. It's one of the keys to the Sri Vaishnava commentaries on Ramayana, that in order to get shelter of Ram, they have 18 cardinal teachings. We were going over this many, almost every class. Number 3 is you need a mediator to plead on your behalf to the Supreme Personality of Godhead to accept you. And in the case of Sugriva, he also had fear. In the case of Marica, he also had fear. But Sugriva surrendered. And Marica didn't surrender because Sugriva had Hanuman's association, And one needs that association of someone who has faith in Ram to get that position of devotional service or surrender to Ram. It's the whole of Ramayana, again, according to these Sri Vaishnava Acharyas, it's a treatise on surrender. It's an explanation of the final verse of Bhagavad Gita. They say, Mame kam sharanam. It's the whole explanation of the process of surrender. And in the process of surrender, Marica didn't because he didn't have Hanuman's association. Sugriva did because he had Hanuman's association. He was nervous. He was jumping around from mountain to mountain. Who are these people? Find out. And just on Hanuman's word, that was it. He trusted Hanuman. And Hanuman had Ram Bhakti. So that was transmitted. So Marica meets his end. He calls out Sita, Ram, Lakshman. And another painting showing Ram firing his arrow, killing the deer. We find Sita saying many nasty things to Lakshman when he refuses to go. And she threatens to take her life if he doesn't go. And so he does what he's not supposed to do. He goes. And mentioned previously, this scene is not in Valmiki Ramayana. There's no Lakshman Rekha mentioned in Valmiki Ramayana. It's in Ramcharitamanas and one other of the Ramayanas, and the others doesn't mention it also. But anyway, it's well known. He makes a circle with his bow, tells she to stay within the circle, and she'll be safe. And sure enough, Ravana lures her outside that circle. The B.G. Sharma painting, that white line around the cottage, and Ravana kidnapping Sita. So this is about Marica, and this is our last slide of the last personality of Ramayana. So tomorrow evening we're going to start another topic. That's my plan, at least. The next topic is going to be the 6 Goswamis. And let's, if all goes well, tomorrow evening for the Sunday program, we'll speak about Sanatana Goswami. And it's going to be a long class. It's because there's a lot to say about Sanatana Goswami. A little introduction to the 6 Goswamis and focusing on, for 6 evenings, about each of the 6 Goswamis. So any discussion on Marica and things that are off topic too are just fine. You have a large living room. It accommodates a lot of people, including in the kitchen. Good space. Way back there, we don't have a microphone cord that's that long. Can you come forward a little bit?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glory to Prabhupada. So Maharaj, during the lecture you mentioned how Ravana and Marica planned basically takes Mother Sita. So I was just thinking while you were sharing that our minds also tricks sometimes like Ravana. And we feel that this plan is good for us, the desires which are coming. And we have like our second mind also, like Marica saying, yeah, it's a good plan, you should do it. But we are just shooting ourselves in the foot. So how to make that, because I am like my mind is like Ravana, I agree, but how to get clarity or purifying that consciousness where I don't make mistakes like Ravana?
Bhakti has the power to do that. And virtue has the power to make course correction, but virtue is in the modes of nature that sometimes there's competition for other modes besides that good mode. So, unadulterated goodness is awakened through bhakti. And when bhakti is there, Krishna gives the intelligence how to come to him. And that, we're not going to be distracted or tricked by Krishna. We can be tricked by our mind that's influenced by material conceptions. Thinking, I got a good idea. That's how Maya works. The saying, even the path to hell is paved by good intentions. So people do things because they think it's smart or right or good or, something. Otherwise, how could they do it? That's the feature of Maya. So to be protected from Maya, we need the antidote. Krishna Bhakti dissolves Maya. Okay. Anyone else? Yes. Microphone behind you.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. You mentioned that medium is required. To surrender to the Lord, medium is required. Like Hanuman, he was with Sugriva.
Yes.
So, but Lord Ramachandra, he promised that if someone is coming directly face to face to him, and he says that I am yours just only once.
Yes.
And then he will be...
Yes. So now, question to you. For someone to come to Ram like that, does that nullify there needs to be some intermediary or someone filling their heart with that devotional inspiration to take shelter of him? Where did that devotional inspiration to take shelter of him arise from? From someone. And then Ram accepts. That's part of the process of surrender. Is there's someone that you bhakti awakens by contact with bhakti. And then when the bhakti is there, you take shelter of Ram and he accepts you. All right? There's 18, it's not just one. Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandat Pranam. As you mentioned that Mother Sita said many nasty things to Lakshman,
Oh yeah.
and what I heard, you can correct me, that when Mother Sita came to the point that, okay, maybe you want to enjoy me, that is the reason you are not leaving.
Yes.
So when I think I see Mother Sita and Lakshman both are devotees.
Oh yeah.
And when Mother Sita go to a reason that is purely bodily base, and then that trigger Lakshman to really leave and go away from that place. So I was thinking, even those are pure, they are devotees, even in such situation, Sita took a reason that is purely a bodily relationship so that Lakshman can go away and help Ram.
You're making a point. What's your question?
Why devotee need to take shelter of bodily based reasons?
Oh,
Is that a Leela?
yes. How could Sita have that thought? Sita can't have that thought. Sita can't have that thought. She can't speak those words. She spoke those words. She had, whether she had the thought or not, she spoke those words. For the purpose of the Leela. Someone else?
Maharaj, so just building on that, this exchange between Mother Sita and Lakshmi, I find one of the most fascinating exchanges. You know, I understand it's Leela and it's you know, we have something to learn from this. So, if I think about two individuals, right, having, you know, on the material platform, having this kind of interaction, what makes someone lose respect at a very fundamental level?
Yes.
When the sense gratification maybe is checked, because it's amazing how that flip happens completely. You know, two individuals who are very close, they have very loving relationship, and then immediately,
when you're pondering on this, are you pondering on the transcendental Sita, or you're pondering on
just
worldly people? Worldly people that have lots and lots of affection, and all on a dime they turn around, it becomes ugly.
Yes, between family members or between friends. What is it that makes that flip-flop so dramatic?
We discussed this a little bit. Your wife asked us not same but similar question. You know, the nonviolent communication became violent communication. And you know, when there's closeness in a relationship, you remember what I said. There are several points. I like it very much when Raghunath Das Goswami was completely uninterested in anything of the material world. But when Lord Chaitanya said, don't be impetuous, don't be an enjoyer of the material world, go back, it takes time to cross the ocean of material existence, act as if you are a worldly person, don't try to be the enjoyer of the world. So he took the instruction and he went back and he showed that he knew exactly how to deal with worldly things. Exactly how to do, and it wasn't like rubbing his hands, hey, I'm good at it. But when his father and uncle were at issue with the Chaduri, the tax collector on behalf of the king, he dealt with it so expertly, including saying, when Raghunath Das was put in jail because the Chaduri was given permission by the king to put his father and uncle in jail. They were out of town, so he put Raghunath in jail. And every day he would go visit Raghunath, trying to get him to get his father to pay the taxes directly to him, because it was a lot of money that was missing from him. Was supposed to go to the king, went to the king, but Chaduri's percentage didn't go to the Chaduri. They cut out the middleman. Anyway, so he said something like this: "You are like my father in our village relationship. You are like my father, and my father is my father. And sometimes brothers, they quarrel, and then the next day they're friends. So yeah, let's not take this very seriously, because it's just like in a family, there's sometimes a quarrel. And so it's why, here's your question, because of proximity, when the wind blows, some bamboos hit another bamboo, and there's a big sound. But we don't take the bamboo hitting another bamboo seriously, because it's just the wind blowing against the bamboo, because they grow close, bamboo grows close to one another. So when there's family members and they say something that's untoward, it's not taken, one can take it seriously. But, a cultured person doesn't take it seriously. It sometimes happens between family members just because they're so close. They say something they don't mean, and the next moment everything is like they never said it. Now, some people get real irritated by that, and some people don't. I know some people get really irritated by it. They hold on to it, and they hold on to it, and they hold on to it, and they hold on to it. And they want to talk it out. And then the other family member says, don't get so stuck on this. It would, I didn't mean that when I said that, and please let's not have to go over why did you say that, because it's not true. And, it's just, anyway, different relationships are different, but your question is, why does it happen? It happens because they're close. And sometimes when people are close, they say something they don't mean. Because they're so close, they just say it. And somebody that's a little less close, you may not even think the thought, but to speak of say it. Something that I've learned about life is sometimes we take relationships for granted. Because that other person means so much to you. You don't continue to invest, little drops of appreciation and gratitude and words of kindness, and because just take it for granted. And then when that take it for granted kind of exchange goes on and on and on, the other person starts to think, maybe they don't like me. Maybe I've seen it. And, the whole thing builds up in their mind, and this means that, and that means something else, and start, and then when it comes back to the person that, you have these bad feelings towards me, is what? Because I took the relationship for granted, and therefore I didn't invest in expressing explicitly my appreciation for you, and going out of my way to do things, because it was just because we're so close. It happens. So your question is, why does it happen? Because we're so close, we're not sensitive enough to how the other person might feel if we say something untoward in a moment. So why did Ram speak that way? To Lakshman, or etc. Why did someone do something that's unbecoming? Why did Sita speak that way? She was attached to Ram, and she knew how to get Lakshman to go get Ram. Say something insulting. Oh, how could you say that? Furthest thing from his mind. But her motive, she's so attached to Ram, go protect Ram. Whatever it takes, go protect Ram. Anyway, so that's where it arises from. Her attachment to Ram, not her cavalier regard for, I can step on your face, that's okay.
If I can just build on that
Okay.
quickly. So I understand what you're saying about the closeness, but in let's say if that same interaction is now between devotees, now that you have to take really extra precaution, correct?
Yeah.
Because there's
Well, this is the nonviolent communication topic again,
mhm.
and different ways of expressing ourselves. But I can give some examples that go the other direction. Here's something that goes the other direction. For some years, Sridhar Swami, Prabhupada disciple that was for so long in Bombay and helping with raising funds for the Juhu temple, etc., etc. He was based in New York. We were co-GBC in New York for some time. And one time, a weekend, Trivikram Maharaj visited. And I heard the two of them talking to each other, and they were just like, one was insulting the other was insulting the one was insulting the other was insulting the one. It's like, what's that? And they were laughing. And, I said, I don't understand your humor here. But it's just, it was in fun. It was part of their happiness and enjoying one another's company. They were so close, they could speak like that, and neither of them took it seriously. I mean, I'm sure there's worldly people that do such things too. Without going into worldly people that do things like that too. Sometimes, this is one case, they didn't express it seriously. It wasn't taken seriously. It was just like, boop, boop. Hey man, boop, boop. It was fun. Like, Kshatriyas sparring with their wrestler, and the wrestler smacks the king, and the king likes it. I'm going to get you, and it's enjoyment for some people. Now that's not exactly what you're referring to. When you're referring to when we're dealing with devotees, we have to be especially careful because we're close. And and it's not only what you say, it's what you don't say. I had an experience once. Gyanagamya Prabhu, Prabhupada disciple, God brother. I found out that he thought I was really angry at him. And I thought, what? And he had a very specific point in mind. He was visiting. I passed him by in the hall, and I looked really angry. And he thought from that I was like, I disliked him and I was angry with him. And I didn't know until a few years later. And it came up in a conversation with him. And then he told me, what's that about? He said, do you remember? And I said, oh. And I just happened to remember some really terrible thing had happened. And I was all absorbed in that really terrible thing that had happened. And I passed right by him in the hall, and I didn't even acknowledge him. I was just so absorbed in this terrible thing and what to do, and looked like, in an unhappy face. And so he didn't know what was going on with me, and I didn't know what was going on with him. I had no intention to, show disfavor or disrespect or not smile and just say, how nice to see you. I'm absorbed in a very difficult situation. Please allow me to deal with that difficult situation, but very nice to see you. And I didn't do that. I was just absorbed in that situation. So we have to be careful, and people can be hurt. Like that example that you gave this morning. We can hurt other people without even knowing we're hurting other people. And the solution isn't just don't associate with devotees and don't get close to devotees, because then you won't have that problem. We need association of devotees, so we do need to be careful regularly. At the end of the day, because this is one of the topics in Ramayana, that's Bharata was misunderstood. That was his, one of the stigmas. So many people thought he was part of the conspiracy against Ram. So when we're misunderstood, what do? So that's another. And we're in close relationships, and sometimes somebody feels we said or did something or didn't do something or didn't say something that was, against them or hurtful to them. And it's going to happen. Why? What was your question? Because we're close. We shouldn't stay away from being close, but be ready to, be misunderstood. And then clarify as much as you can, and just stand by good character. Always exhibit and carry good character. At the end of the day, that light will shine through. Okay. I think do we have anything online? We have something online. We have something online. You may have to go to where the microphone is.
Maharaj, this is a clarification from Raghunandan Prabhu. The reason for Marica not surrendering directly to Lord Rama is that he did not have a guru.
He didn't have someone that was, he wasn't, someone carrying bhakti didn't pass on bhakti to him. Not exactly he didn't have guru, but he didn't have, because it doesn't have to be guru, someone carrying bhakti, that to awaken bhakti within him. That's what didn't happen.
There's a question from Sanjay Prabhu. Why did Sita not go with Lord Rama when Dasharatha sent Sumantra for the crowning ceremony? As we know, Dasharatha actually called Rama to tell him about the exile. Why would the wife not go to her husband's crowning ceremony?
Oh, she was going to be part of it, but she wasn't involved up at that point, or at that early stage of getting the bad news. So Ram had to bring the bad news to her. She wasn't part of it because she wasn't the one that was being asked to go in exile. It was Ram. It wasn't Lakshman, it wasn't Sita, it was Ram. So she wasn't involved because that was Kaikeyi's wish. Those two boons had everything to do with Ram, not Sita. And she was planning to be part of the crowning ceremony, but it didn't happen. That's it. Okay, and then I think we're going to end.
Satyavrata Das, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. If somebody is determined not to interact, what should be our attitude?
What should be our attitude? Respectful. Give them their space. Continue to be respectful. Display respect. Express it, be it, and give them their space. And that, time may change that, that desire to not interact into a desire to interact. Give them their space. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much, Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Ki Jai.